Boy, howdy. Welcome to something that is absolutely ridiculous. Probably the most puzzling change that I saw in all of the battle ratings adjustment was the F8U-2 and the F8E moving from 10.3 all the way down to 10.0. Now, I tried to play this plane at 10.0 and the 10.0, 9.0 day. I could not find a game. That's how many people were playing it. And the fact that this moved down from 10.3 to 10.0 is I just don't understand it. My brain cannot comprehend it because at 10.3, I thought this plane was great. I thought this plane was fantastic. I've played it more than a couple of times, and it was good enough that I more or less avoided it on 10.3 days because it was kind of like the de facto easy go-to choice, like kind of like playing the game on easy mode. And somehow, American mains have banded together, become paid actors, and managed to get this down tiered in sim to 10.0. This thing in RB just moved up from, I think, 10.0 up to 10.3, or from 10.3 to 10.7. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it did move up because it was absolutely busted. And the BRs in this range in sim are very similar to Air RB. And I didn't get to play this at 9.0 to 10.0. Just couldn't find a game. However, I'm doing the opposite of that. I am playing this on the hardest day of the week. The hardest ops that you're going to get is 10.0 to 11.0. MiG-21 BIS is basically kind of the class of aircraft that is the best thing that you can face. And we're taking off. And just to kind of show you my ops are not just the enemy team. Half the time, my ops are the friendly team. Like, I'm pretty sure I've already been friendly fired at by an F4E just leaving by runway. Like, guy was just completely clueless. And here's what happens at this tier. You have to get close enough to your friendlies for your blue name to pop up, because a lot of the times they just don't know. And this plane has a very distinct silhouette. It's very like long, chunky, looks like a tube with it looks like a plane that a second grader would draw. It's like, oh, it's got pointy wings, and that's it. So what does this plane actually do that's good versus bad? And the thing is, the plane does everything good, does nothing bad, because it's the GOAT. Here we go. We got the F-40 in the background. Dude actually just kind of came in and shot at me. Like, I don't know how, but it just does. Those are your ops in sim is other American players. But the F8U is technically, it's the last gunfighter, and it's Pierre Spray's freaking wet dream. This thing carries 4 AIM-9Ds. You can also carry radar missiles, AIM-9Cs. It's a radar-guided AIM-9. I don't really recommend them, especially on games where the combat normally takes place at low altitude. Maybe if you're being creative, maybe run like one 9C for that like funny head-on kill that you get every once in a while, or just really, in all honesty, just run 4 of the AIM-9Ds. The AIM-9Ds at this tier are a very reasonably strong missile. They do kind of the same thing that the AIM-9G does. Not quite as good. They are caged, so they're kind of just slewed to the gun sight, and they don't move to the radar or anything like that. But they pull, on the stat card, it's 18 Gs, but basically it's a long-range missile that will basically run down your enemies for you. It works pretty dang well. Now, the first engagement that we're going into, I'm going to show kind of a whole sortie here to start with, and then it's going to kind of quicken up towards the end because there's like 18 kills in this game. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at the AI, I'm looking at the kill feed, and it means that I know that players are there. And everyone has contrails. I look behind me, MiG-21, and I can tell it's a MiG-21 just because of the way that it is. There's a couple kind of like visual indicators, like the MiG-21, sometimes they look like other planes depending on the angle that you're looking at them from, especially kind of like side aspect from a distance. But usually in sim, to kind of confirm the identification of the target, you just kind of look at it, and eventually you'll get some kind of different angle. You're like, huh, it's either this or that, and then you're like, oh, it's actually this thing. And we're just going to go down in behind him, shoot a 9D. 9D is going to close the distance, and he's not going to be able to run away from that. So it's not even a 21, it's a J7E. A better 21 that's probably the best plane that I can fight at this BR. And even though the J7E is probably a little bit better on paper, a little bit faster, has a little bit better missiles. The missiles still kind of fill the same niche for the J7E as my missiles do, which are they're basically just high-speed rear aspect missiles that are good from rear aspect, good at closing distances. And we get another 21, and we're going to do basically exactly the same thing. As soon as he stops turning, we shoot a missile closes the distance, it kills him. Now, could we go and kill him with guns? Yeah, sure, but the longer that we are committed to a fight, the more likely it is for someone to come in behind us and third party us. And this plane's rear visibility is not the greatest. Most of the planes at this BR don't have really good rear visibility because I guess everyone kind of forgot about bubble canopies at the end of like Korea and decided that looking behind you was for squares and just made rear visibility not very good in a lot of these planes. This is also an issue that happens with like MiG-21s, F-4 Phantoms, and pretty much a lot of the things at this tier. Like back in the 1960s, I think they were prioritizing speed, or they were prioritizing something, prioritizing putting LSD in the punch, and doing Project MK Ultra, all the good stuff. But I don't know why this thing doesn't have a bubble canopy. It would be really nice if it did, but it really doesn't. The rear visibility is workable. You can really work around it with just kind of doing like gentle left and right clearing turns. And like the plane itself, the only real weakness is kind of its top speed. At sea level, at low altitude, it's technically supersonic. It gets to about like Mach 0.98 or so, and then it just tries to shake itself to death, and it'll eventually get through like the Mach barrier. But it's not going much above the speed of sound at low altitude. So 99% of the time, you're going to be subsonic in this thing. You're going to be kind of sitting around that 1140 kph. But if you really need to avoid some planes, especially subsonics, because you can fight 9.0s with this, you can just kind of pitch up, power up, and keep going. Get an Su-22 in front of us, and this is where the 90 is really good. The 90 is really good for that because if he runs away, we don't really have a chance of catching him. But same thing, he has bad rear visibility, doesn't see us. We come in, shoot another missile, and basically 3 of our 9Ds so far have connected. We go back into our low altitude. I'm just trying to sit below the contrails and not kind of indicate exactly what we are. We are a rather large, kind of obvious plane. The F8U has a very, very distinct silhouette with like the chin radiator thing, or it's not a radiator, the intake. I'm thinking props instead of jets, but I mean, you get the point. And especially kind of side like that, like the fuselage is really, really long. It's just a very, very easy plane to tell once you give like a good angle for it. And we don't really want that, especially early game right now. We have an F5A, a Chinese one that's kind of lurking around, and he's not doing bad, but it also means that because they have an F5A, I can't really trust that every F5 that I see is a friendly, which is one of the gripes that people have about kind of simulator battles in general is not bunching up all of the NATO planes versus the Russian planes, which it makes sense from a gameplay perspective if they were like equal, but I don't think they are right now, and I don't think that this at 10.0 has any equals. And I also don't think the MiG-21s, especially the lowest one that you can face is 9.7. It's the F-13 with like 60 rounds of ammo, bad missiles, bad radar, kind of a flight model that's like a 21 with even less engine power in a plane that it really needs the engine power to perform well, I think, at things that are not 9.7. Really, in all honesty, if I was playing Russia 9.7, I would take the MiG-19S over pretty much anything else that BR, because the 19S has a lot of the same strengths that this plane does as far as like maneuverability goes. I think the 19S is probably overall better in a dogfight, but you are losing good missiles. You are losing like pretty darn good guns and replacing them with like probably okay-ish guns with the 30 mils, but low firing time, low capability of getting a lot of kills, and you don't have flares. And at 9.7, not having flares is not very kosher. This thing has about 60 flares. I do sometimes add just like a little bit of chaff to it, but really at this BR you can just run pure flares. You'll be perfectly fine. Also, the wing rip changes probably benefited this plane the most of any plane that is in the game. This plane is no longer super fragile. You can just yank as hard as you want. You can pull up to 16 Gs. It'll be perfectly fine. At least that's been my experience so far. I think you have to take deliberate effort to break the wings on this plane, which is a lot different than it used to be. Anyways, we come into the point. and we're going to start trying to whittle down the numbers as fast as possible. We pop in behind a J7E. We're outside of his cockpit visibility range. He doesn't see us. He's not pulling hard enough. AIM-9D pulls in. The AIM-9D is a much better alternative to like the 9B. Kind of has the same utility, but at this BR it's actually a lot better. Now, going into the point, I don't know how many people are here. I know there's a lot because it is getting captured. So the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do like an ascending turn, and I'm going to try to get people not necessarily behind me like in gun aspect, but I know if I make this big kind of gentle turn around 800 kph, I can kind of bait people behind me, and in a sustained turn, I'm kind of better than most of the things of this BR. I think the only thing that can contest me is like a MiG-19, and there's not going to be any in here because this is an 11.0 day, so it's 10.0 to 11.0. I bait these guys up, I bring them up into their contrail altitude just to make it easier for me to see them and kind of assess what's going on, and I'm going to start picking them off. Now, the first priority right here is the F5. The F5 is probably the second most maneuverable plane behind like the MiG-19 as far as like this BR is concerned. Yeah, I know someone's going to be like, oh, the Draken, this, that. Like, in this game, the Chinese F5 has kind of proven to be kind of the biggest threat to me and the one that I'm most worried about, because if he gets mixed up with my F5s, I can't really tell which one is which until I get super close, which means if I ignore the wrong one at the wrong time, he pops in behind, he's got good guns, and most of these other guys in like their MiG-21s, any of the other planes, they don't have like really aimable kind of rail cannons, but anyways, we get a nice little shot on him, we get a love tap. He's lost his tail control. He's going to be flying away. I'm not too worried about him anymore. That removes him from the fight. And instead of chasing him down, I'm going to keep my 650, 800 kph turn to just kind of keep assessing what's going on. I don't really care if these guys are behind me because I can just outturn them, but I'm not going to put myself super duper slow because I'm a big target. If I get super duper slow, then yeah, I can point the nose really slow, but then I'm like not actually moving. If you maintain speed, especially at these BRs, you're not immune to guns, but most people are not very good at aiming. We pop in behind an Su-25, and we clear our friendly 6. He smashes into the ground. We get the old fighter rescuer tab, and we just keep doing a 600 kph turn. We are outside of the point right now, but it's not terribly important. As long as we can keep them from capping it, we should be fine. We should at least not start to lose on tickets. And with the capture points, sometimes you got to make the call. Sometimes you're like, well, we're not going to capture it. It's been up there for too long, but we can stop them from capturing it. We come in, J7E again. I think this is the same guy as before. We can see that he's got missiles on right now, which means he's a little bit heavier, and he's just kind of stuck turning in the same direction. I don't think that the J7E, especially with me being at 5 minutes of fuel, really has a chance of outturning me. If he's really good, if he's cracked as hell, yeah, maybe, but it's like one of those matchups that I haven't tested the matchups for this plane. I just, going into this, kind of blind, haven't played it for like 2 or 3 months, just going in, pointing guns at things, fragging things, and it's hard to make an outright conclusion just based on random gameplay, but I mean, this is to me, this is so obvious that it shouldn't be 10.0, that really every single day of the week, this is always going to be viable. It's always going to be one of the best pickups. And this is like one of the downsides to Sim, I think, is like, if you are making recommendations for tech trees to grind, you can just say grind the US tech tree and then stop. Because no matter what day of the week that it is, basically the US has either the best plane at the battle rating or one of the best planes. There is no day of the week, no battle rating range where the US is not like entirely viable or entirely dominant for the most part. There's like maybe one day per week in this Vietnam tier where the MiG-23 MLD is down tiered and doesn't fight IRCCM missiles, where it's going to be really strong. But even against the MLD, flying F4E the other day, like I was doing perfectly fine. I was doing acceptable. The flight model nerfs on the MLD they're substantial enough that they make a difference when you're playing against random normies. Now, if you're playing against people who are good, people that play a lot of Sim, then it'll obviously stop, but really don't have to worry about that. Anyways, we go back, we resupply, we come out of our base, and I pick up a 25, and he's behind me. The way that I pick him up, though, is like, I just hear him. I hear him pass. I hear the ka-choo! I'm like, oh, shit, that's not good. And I start pulling, and we get 225s, but same thing, maintaining speed. As long as we maintain speed, as long as we're not slow in front of their guns at close range, we're probably going to be okay. The firing range that most people can get in Sim is basically 1/2 to 1/3 of that you can get in Air RB. Something that's really dangerous in Air RB is trying to do like these high-speed turns, like 0.8 kilometers in front of anything, because you get mouse aim, you just hold down the trigger, and you can kind of like more or less win. But we come in, SU-25, we're going to get some hits on him. I've lost sight of the other one. The other guy just like flies in front, and it's kind of like, oh no, that's not good. We get a hit on this guy, and I've lost sight of the other one, and I'm going to kind of let him fly away and try to pick up the other one. And I didn't notice this before, but the SU-25 that was attacking me crashed. Like, the kill feed shows that, and if I had picked that up, I would have went back for that other 25 and got him and picked up another pretty like reliable, easy kill. And at that point, because I'm near the base, I could probably just RTB, get more ammo, and just go back in fresh. That guy does successfully get away. Unfortunate, unlucky. Doesn't really have much of an influence on the game, so we just skip a little bit further ahead. We come into a new engagement. I pick up an F5, and he's attacking another F5. And this is one of those things where like you have to figure out what one is the different one, which one's the friendly, which one's the enemy. And typically what I do is I will focus on the one that is the most threatening first and verify whether or not that is friend or enemy, and then worry about the one that was being attacked. So if I don't know, I'm going to go for the guy that's making the attacks, because he probably poses like the most threat. Now in this case, you can kind of tell the difference between the two once you get close enough. Is the Chinese one is silver, and then the American one is like that desert kind of camo color. Although I do think there are some silver skins for the American one, so you don't necessarily, you can't just like blind fire at every single silver F5 that you see, because you will eventually probably friendly fire someone. But we do just kind of sit behind this guy. We did fire a missile, and because he popped flares, because he's turning, and also because he hasn't like shed all of his speed right away, this guy's kind of like the biggest threat in all of this game, at least at this point. But we just kind of anchor behind him, hold down the trigger, lead again, hold down the trigger, lead again. Eventually we get the lead correct, we get close enough, and like we win. This is probably about a minute later, and I make a boo-boo. I do something that's kind of silly. I know that there's an A5C in the mix. It has magic ones. I did see it fire one of the magic ones, and we're going to pick him up behind us here. I'm going to try to outturn him, but this is one of those planes that I don't want to start in this position, and he can kind of close the distance and eventually start shooting at me. I don't want him to get close, and I think, well, I'll dump the nose, extend away, come back, and I'm going to try to keep looking behind me for the magic and flare when it happens, and I just don't see it. Seeing like the contrails right here, just, it's not going to happen. I keep dropping a little bit of flares, and this is where that rear visibility kind of hurts, is like I just can't see it. I'm just not able to cover the whole entire thing. Now, what I could have done a little bit different is I probably should have just popped air brake and started rolling around his guns and tried to force him to overshoot and to just fight at slow speed that way, because a lot of guys are really scared once they get slow. But like, I didn't see it. I was just trying to like casually pop my flares. I only had like one left. Unfortunate, but I mean that's one of the downsides of this plane. It's one of the universal downsides of all of these like Vietnam planes anyways. It's just your rear visibility is not very great. Same thing, we're gonna come in and we're gonna try to get a kill. We're setting up for a guy, and we are not looking behind us, and guess what's gonna happen? We get one in front of us, and we're trying to track him, and sure enough, AIM-9P F5 kills us again. 2 deaths in a row. Kind of like bitter, like super duper depressed, but I mean, if I really cared about my stats, I would have left the game. But no, we stick to it, and we're gonna fly out. We're gonna try to change our tactics a little bit, be a little bit more cognizant of the F5, kind of pay attention to kind of the areas that he's loitering around, and like I look at the kill feed too to determine what kind of planes I need to be looking for based on my location. Like, I just see the F5 died, right? He's back at his runway. He's not going to be on my side of the map right now. Now, in about 2 to 3 minutes, I probably have to worry about that. But right now, I know that my priority as far as looking for things is going to be things that are not F5s. I don't have to worry about them for a bit. We come in, we shoot the F5 with a missile. These 9Ds are they're very good at exactly the thing like that, when a guy isn't quite aware of where you're at, and you can fire them from like far enough away that they're not immediately obvious. Like, obviously, probably the best aim 9D shot is to fire them at almost max range, where like the motor burns out, but it has like enough momentum to just go into the target, because then it's basically invisible. We come in, we get another MiG-21, and these guns that are on this, they're the Colt 20 millimeters. They hit hard most of the time. Sometimes they have a tendency to like slowly dismantle the planes, but we come in, another MiG behind us. We see the R-60. We're able to flare it. The R-60s are very, very flareable. Pretty much all of the missiles at this BR, as long as you can see them, you can force a gunfight instead. And this is the last gunfighter, and that's exactly what we're going to do. This plane's really, really good at it now that it doesn't rip anymore. Even before it had the ripping issue, and when it was very, very fragile, it was still very good at basically exactly the same kind of thing. This guy comes in, we're just going to one-tap him in the face, and we're going to fly away. The 21 bis is the hardest competition you're going to get in this plane, and I don't think the 21 bis is really all that good in most players' hands. I think to play the 21 bis against this, you really have to stand on the engine, and it's something that I would not expect the general player base to do with any kind of consistency. Heck, it's something that I wouldn't consider myself capable of doing with any kind of consistency against like an equally skilled like opponent. Like, yes, in theory, the MiG-21 can come in faster, be supersonic, and then kind of do like a long, gentle vertical spiral and stall out the F8U-2. But the F8U-2 does have the guns that can kind of bridge that gap. Like, yeah, you can go up and stall out, but this thing has rail cannons, and the MiG-21 bis has the GSH-23, and it has kind of an awkward gun sight, gun position combination, where the Gussie-23 is kind of like a super-duper short-range cannon as far as I'm concerned. Not very great in deflection shots, which means kind of this plane doesn't really beat the 21 bis outright, but it really does go a long way of canceling out any of the advantages that the 21 has. And the 21 matchup is probably a lot more fair against the F4E, as opposed to kind of like this thing. Yes, it's fair in the sense that like the 21 bis can run away from this. All of the other 21s, though, that are at this tier, like the SMT, the SM, some of the earlier ones, I would rather, like, yes, I understand that those planes are good. Those planes should be good. I will eventually probably mess around with them. But as far as something that has been just easy and pleasant to fly, like this thing, now that it doesn't rip, I can turn my brain off. I don't have to make any effort for this. Like, this is, it's fun. It's cheesy. It shouldn't be 10.0, though. It should not be 10.0. We come in, that's going to cost us. I see a Yak-38. I'm like, oh, my brain's like, I'm American. That's a Russian plane. I can shoot the Russian planes. The Russian planes are on the enemy team. There's another like complaint with Sim, too, is like the AI never like make sense. It's always some kind of random hodgepodge of crap. Sometimes you might just shoot like active radar missiles at prop planes for whatever reason. And we see a Saab J35XS. That's probably one of the planes that can compete with us in a dogfight. I don't really know. I think the plane still does funny AOA things, but the energy retention turnaround thing is abysmal now. And it wasn't really all that special to begin with, so I think you just kind of energy it and fly in circles. But when you have a chance, like, you can just shoot it with a 9D. Like, the long-range 9D goes really, really hard as long as you can IFF your targets correctly. We come in, we get another MiG-21 in front of us, and because he probably hears us, he might have seen us, we're just going to kind of glue ourselves toward his 6, and he gets blown up by an Ariete, which, unlucky for him, but I mean, honestly, that's not really surprising at this tier, because like the Ariete, yeah, it's a subsonic, but it has like the same dynamics of like a 0 with crack thrust away. Like, if you turn fight something else near it, it can close the distance and it'll kill you. Another 9D kill here. The guy is slotting in on a friendly target, turns in front of us. and we get set up for a pretty easy kill. Like the 9Ds are, they're nice to have. Like a 9D versus a 9B is like night and day difference as far as utility goes. Probably one of the missiles of all time as far as this BR goes. I would honestly probably take the 9D over something like the R60M, even though the R60M is all aspect, just because of the range advantage that the 9D has on like an R60 is just, it gives utility to this plane. It allows it to like close the gap and kind of close in and hit people that would otherwise be forced to run away. And the missile, even if it doesn't hit, can be used to force a turn fight. Come in, Saab J35XS. These are easy fights. I don't think I have to commentate about like, okay, I go up, I post high, I'm going to maintain speed. Like if you maintain enough speed with this plane, kind of keep it around that like 800 kph down to, you can go all the way down to probably around 400. As long as you're not slow in front of someone's guns, you're generally probably speaking safe. You pop a couple of flares when you're getting a little bit schizophrenic, and that'll probably deal with any of the random R60s. We get an A5C in front of us, and this is where we're going to go kind of slow, and we use the flaps. The flaps on this thing are kind of neat because they're not real flaps. It's a variable angle of incidence wing or some bull crap, but basically the wing like tilts up. It's kind of neat. But A5C, same thing. He's going to scissors back in front of us, and we get this. He's going to die. We're going to finish him off here. We don't want him to go back to base. And one of the things I always do is kind of try to look at the damage that they have to decide whether or not I need to do anything to secure the kill. This guy has enough control authority that he could probably make it back to base, so we set him on fire, and we do our shoulder check. We're going to turn around and start going another direction. Same thing. This is going to be a pretty typical AIM 9D kind of kill. Come in, low altitude, spot this guy. He doesn't see us. He probably hears a Kashu at just the last second, and instead of using the 9D, he's turning in front of us. We have guns on. If he runs away, he has to flare. He can do that, but he probably thinks that the MiG-21 BIS is up to par with the F8U. Probably not familiar with actually fighting this thing when someone is competent, because like obviously people that are competent don't use this thing because it moved down to 10.0. And anyways, that's going to be, I think that's 18 kills. It might be 14. I don't really know. Anyways, we're going to finish up the video. That's 30 minutes of F8U-2 gameplay. And we're going to look at our rewards here. And for an hour of play, 18 kills is pretty pog. The rewards are, they're sim rewards. So, like, you get what you get. But, I mean, that's the video.